5 weeks left to go in your AFL fantasy season, and where has the season gone? Look, some of you might think it's gone to the toilet, and maybe that's a fair assessment of your season to date. But regardless, we've still got 10 trades to be able to make this year to get our teams into either a personal best ranking spot, a place to make some learnings and observations to prepare for 2026, or to go and get yourself that league premiership that you've been chasing ever since the format opened in December last year. Who are my top 10 trade targets for you this week, though? Going to kick it off with one of the most expensive players in the game, and it's a player I'm dubbing the one I don't want to miss on these final 5 weeks. Who is he? Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. Yeah, he's genuinely the one player when I look at all the variables that we either put some value on or even think we should put some value on. He almost comes out on top in every single one of those metrics. Got a great fixture, unbelievable role. And then that's a fixture and role using DVP for both the inside mid and halfback, which he's still floating across both of those. Yes, the Melbourne matchup this week isn't awesome. It's not bad, but it's not awesome, especially if Ed Langdon is assigned some form of tagging duties. But after that, North Melbourne, Essendon, Richmond. I mean, my goodness me, he's knocking up 120, 130 plus scores out of just relative ease and fun and dominating and creating so much havoc for non-owners. The reason I've dubbed him the one I don't want to go without is the fixture's great. All the metrics we capture are great. And he's so expensive now. It feels really hard to get there. So many coaches over the last 2 weeks have had many of their trades made for them. Maybe not in terms of who they got, but who had to go out with Cherry, with Martin, with Horne-Francis, to a lesser extent, Rosie. I think a lot of Rosie owners had to hold through that. Not everyone, but a lot had to, based on 2 other issues that were preeminent over it. But how do you find the funds to get into Naz if you don't have him? That's the genuine question, because if you had excess or salary cap saved, you probably spent it last week being able to get a stronger, if not 2 strong options from your forced moves last week. So it's very much a luxury move. It is no value, but he is the guy that over the next 5 weeks could absolutely cost you your league premiership and cost you the PB rank that you're going for, because his ownership, while pretty strong at the upper ends of the rankings tree, is the kind of guy that if he's the unique and you're chasing a hat, that is a high gauntlet that I, friend, would not want to be running with you. He is the one you don't want to let get away, but he's the one that's so hard to justify spending that big cash on, because not everyone's also looking for a defensive upgrade. Maybe McCrae owners are. I don't know if you could off Mills off the back of that ton last week, but to me, he's the one that I think is going to get away from a bunch of people in 2025, that if they had him, maybe their fortunes would have changed. All right, let's jump into my number 2 trade target. Matt Kennedy is back. He's, a month ago, over $1 million, one of, if not the most expensive forward outside of Bailey Smith, but has had some role variance and certainly some scoring variance over the last 4 to 5 weeks, which really hadn't been seen at all during the season proper. That role changed drastically against the Crows a week and a half ago, and it had coaches a little bit apprehensive to go to him this round just gone, despite having a Martin and a Horne-Francis trade out. There was some apprehension because nobody wants to spend near $1 million on a player that's having a role change and is now going to start dishing up 50s and 60s. And as a result, you're paying premium forward scoring for a rookie scoring. No one wants to do that. But regardless, the role was back last week. So at the moment, it's really only a 1 week deviation that we've seen in terms of a centre bounce role. So I think we can call that an aberration with a little bit more confidence. Alongside that, he's much cheaper than he is at $918K. That's super value for a guy that's been probably the most underrated premium forward of the year. And to go alongside this Bulldogs run is absolutely magnificent. This is where you do want to be stocks on Bulldogs players. For inside mids, it's awesome. So for Libba, for Bont, for Kennedy, for Richards, it's awesome. For Dale, for Darcy, English. Having a lot of Bulldogs on this run home is a powerful option for you. And it's why, for me, Matt Kennedy sits in there. Because, again, some coaches, if you had that triangle of pain of Cherry, Martin, and also Horne-Francis, you probably had to sacrifice one to deal with this week. So premium forwards might still be something you're needing to address. And if that is the case, Matt Kennedy is the best of the lowly owned and value options that sit through there. He's my number 2 trade target. Let's go spicy for you at number 3, and spicy by name, but not by recent scoring trend. My number 3 trade target, Harley Reed. If you look at just the last 3 weeks as a sample size, he's the 3rd best defender in AFL fantasy right now. Who would have thought? And he's under 800K. So if you're a McCrae owner and you're a little bit dissatisfied with some scoring variance that has happened for him over the last couple of weeks, you can pocket about 100K going from a McCrae all the way down to Reed and get, at least over the last 3 to 5 weeks, a better, if not comparable, scoring outcome. That's a handy spot to be in if you also just don't want to cash down and cash out an option. Maybe you've got no cash at all in your bench hygiene left to be able to maximize. This is the creative sort of maneuver that you could do. Since round 14, he's had just the 1 score under 90. And so to be able to get an average over 100 over the last 3 weeks, and since round 14, just the 1 sub 90 score, and to do it under 800K as a defender mid, friend, this is creative comes to play right here. I'm happy to put this one right in the mix for you as my number 3 trade target. Number 4, let's help some coaches that might be in a different situation than maybe where you are, or perhaps it's right where you are, where you still want to generate some cash, but you're needing some coverage in your forward lines. If you didn't have it last week, you probably got exposed or had 2 forced trades to be able to address. I want to put Ashton McMahon in the mix for you as my number 4 trade target. It's a playing cover. Let's call it for what it is. But for basically $300,000, a guy that's going at a low 50s average over the last 3 weeks, if you're trying to skinny off a little bit of cash off your playing forward option and you just want some depth of coverage, this is the play for you. He's looked really impressive over the last couple of weeks for Carlton, probably one of their most damaging forwards over the 3-week stretch. Not everyone's looking for bench coverage right now. Some are like, I've got an Archer May type. I'm just going to let it go. But there are teams that are needing to be able to get creative with their cash generation, whether it be off a May type or an others, and squeeze a little bit more cash out of the lemon to be able to put it on somewhere else. But for those coaches that are wanting a downgrade option this week in their forward line, it's Moyer. You could throw Taj Houghton in there at about 50K more, but I think given you're going to get comparable scoring, the DPP does factor in for Houghton, of course. But to me, I'd probably say Moyer, given neither of those guys, you should be needing them on your field. They're genuinely security blankets and a chance to squeeze out a little bit of cash out of a player. Outside of that, you're probably not going there. And then to round out my top 5 trade targets, coming off the back of a 124 and a 132, one of our Patreons and the creator of the Fantasy Marketplace is going to be very excited about this. Tim Taranto, my number 5 trade target. He's been exceptional over the last 2 weeks, impacting the game in and around stoppage, but then becoming a threat forward of the ball. So to have an average in the high 120s over the last fortnight is outstanding. However, we do have to take opposition into consideration. He's had a very, very favourable DVP option over the last 2 weeks, but his market share throughout the majority of the year, but certainly over the back half, has been outstanding for a player of his ilk. So he's got the Pies this week, which not great from a fixture analysis perspective, but then they go into the Suns, who over the last 10 has been one of the inside midfield matchups we've been targeting. He's got a great run to come through there. Teams are not going to show any tag sort of presence on him, certainly, let alone probably any other Richmond player. For Collingwood, they'll absolutely come out seething after a disappointing loss on the weekend. But if you can't get to those $1 million plus guys, but you're looking for someone that can hit the same scoring pedigree and has recency of scoring form and favourable role, Tim's the guy that sits that spot. If you can't get up to Bont, you can't get up all the way to a Goulden, who's been a little unders over the last fortnight, it's safe to say. But if you can't get to the upper echelons, Taranto's got just as good a ceiling as them and is at a comparably way cheaper price point that's much more attainable. Pretty happy to recommend Timmy Taranto in my top 10 trade targets. So the 5 so far, Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera, Matt Kennedy, Harley Reed, Moya, and Tim Taranto. Those are the 5. Let's start creating some creative moments for you and also give you some protection outlets. But next guy in for me, my number 6 trade target is Chad Warner. He's made appearances through the trade targets throughout 2025, but it's been a minute since I've had him in there. And part of the reason is it's been since round 11 was the last time he scored a ton. So not great. But there are some positive things that we need to thread out of this for him. Number one, our forward kind of ceiling of what we need from our top end forwards over the last month has moved and shifted a lot with no Martin and no Horne-Francis. Bailey Smith, while probably everyone's got him that you're competing against, hasn't been as unbelievably scary over the last month as he has been for probably the 3 months prior to that. Isaac Rankin has had a good 3 weeks, but before that was a little patchy. Petrarca has had some ups and downs. In summary, to be a top line forward over the last 3 to 5 weeks, you don't have to be running a 105, 110 plus. You just need to be running 90s. And he hasn't in the last month dropped a score under 82. So Warner's not too far away. Alongside that, while you might be a bit more worried about the market share, the fact is Heaney and Goulden have now surpassed him as the players you want to and or need to stop out of this Sydney midfield mix. And what you should be looking for with trades at this junction of the year is leveraging the fixture DVP that exists to be able to give you that informed decision of if I'm trading into a player, I'm not just looking for a 1 week hit. I do want at least 2, if not 3 of the next 5 games to be uber favorable. That's what I'm really looking for. Are the undeniable just value that sits there in a player's role, unprecedented scoring that I just have to get on? Or is there a guy that's got 2 or 3 awesome matchups based on his position and opponent that he could absolutely tear it apart and give me some great value? That's where, for me, Chad Warner sits in this spot. The 3 easiest matchups for inside mids over the last 5 rounds are Essendon, a West Coast, and North Melbourne. He has 2 of those 3. He has Essendon and West Coast. So he hits my metric of if you've got 2 of the best top of the line in here, how can I say no to this? You've got to look at, and look, he's pretty generous on the dollars upgrade side as well. So great fixture. The attention's going elsewhere. And his basement has not been that far off the mix of what our current trending forwards are doing. I think Chad Warner's going to go under the radar. I know he's still sitting in a bunch of teams from mid-year upgrade cadence, but he's probably been wiped out of a lot of non-owners' mindsets because he hasn't been awesome. But his last month has been solid. Yes, it's the first ton in basically 2 and a bit months, but the fixture now is opening up wide. The value is good, and there's not a tag coming in sight. I'm happy to go and put Chad Warner as my number 6 trade target. Sitting in at number 7, and guy that was a little underwhelming last week, but I'll explain why he's still there. Jackson McCrae is my number 7 trade target. Coming up against the Cats last week, they've unbelievably flipped the script where the first kind of month or 2 of the year, they were the team we were all targeting as inside mid matchups, super duper favorable. And now, at this junction over the last 5 rounds, they're the team we want to avoid. They've been super duper restrictive on that. Like right now, the Cats are inside the top 3 for the hardest teams for our inside midfielders to score against. And we put Jackson McCrae in this spot last week, knowing this full well and waving the flag saying, hey, this is probably going to hurt. But now the scoring has opened up drastically for you. He's still really good value sitting at that spot. I'm happy for you to jump on and get your hands on it. St Kilda's market share of points in a game is unbelievable. That they are still kicking the ball around, and it's not really hurting. Like Sinclair's popping, Naz is popping, Steele is popping, and up until last round, so was McCrae. So there's more than enough about the way they move and share the ball to ensure there's AFL fantasy points to go around for Jackson McCrae. Over the next 5, this fixture is great for inside mids or players that plays inside mids, which is what McCrae does. Yeah. I don't want to be against it. He's low on my trade targets. I'm not going to deny that. He's low, but I'm pretty happy to still advocate for him. Let's give you 3 more players before we wrap up this episode. Brynn Meyers. He's under the $1 million mark now, which crazy to think he got there at one point of the year. But do you remember what I said a few minutes ago about Chad Warner, where I want to be able to target players that have multiple hits over these next 5 weeks, multiple opponents that I see them as top 2 or 3 based on the scoring that they've been giving up, the points they've been allocating. The DVP is the sharpest way to say it. Brynn Meyers and and Geelong have North Melbourne this week coming up. In fact, let's just tell you the top 3 weeks that I'm targeting over the next 5. North, Essendon, Tigers. 3 of the best general forward matchups for us. And then the unique thing to him is he plays so high up the ground, there's almost some wing and halfback share of points that sits there. So much of these 3 matchups look amazing. Relatively unique for a guy that's been as powerful scoring as he has. And with the matchups that have kind of landed this week in terms of teams winning and losing, this not just top 4, this top 8 is still really needing to take shape. I think Geelong are a legit chance to be top 4 based on their fixture, but they're not the certainty they might have been with a few of the results changing over the weekend just gone. And so the thought that Geelong might be in that luxurious position to rest their superstars over the last 5 rounds of the year might not be as easy to hold on to as it was once before. Regardless, he's got a fantastic ceiling about him. His scoring basement is really consistent and not hurting you. His ownership is super low for a guy of his pedigree, and the fixture is awesome with 3 of his next 5 unbelievably favourable for his position. Jump on if you can. It could be a fantastic ride. Let me give you my last 2 trade targets. They both come from the same team. One is 100% a protective mechanism. The other is just full creative cowboy. Nothing more, nothing less. Harry Sheasel is my number 9 trade target. 5 of his last 7 games, 100 plus. In those 7 games, he's only had the 1 score under 90. So there's that consistency of scoring that sits there, which is really, really handy. But there's not a lot of other reasons that scream pick me in this spot for Harry, because he's not really put any monster ceiling games on for a while in terms of frequency of them. And again, the last 700, okay, solid, but you're contrasting him to say an Ash or a Whitfield or a Wanganeen-Milera, Zorko. He's not really hitting the ceiling of volume that this guy is. But the reason you might consider Harry is for a couple of reasons. Number one is a bit of risk mitigation. And that's probably the leading reason, where you go, yeah, I'm spending that $1 million mark on a player, but his ownership across the board is absolutely huge and wild. Again, different in contrast of the overall format versus, say, like top 100 that sits there. Sure, a little bit of variance there. But he's the kind of guy that we know, based on history, can absolutely tear it to shreds. We know that if that role sits back for him, he's away. And so the appeals for some coaches here is, how do I minimize risk in my team without really sacrificing my scoring basement too much? The ceiling I might, but the basement I might not be hurting. And so now all of a sudden a guy that's, I think it's like 60% ownership across the formats, I'm bringing him in. he's still finding a way to score. There are some good matchups, not amazing ones, but some good matchups littered through the next 5 that you go, I'm just going to play a protective maneuver. I'm getting still a high caliber premium defender. Let's not discount just how good he's been or disregard how prominent his scoring has been over his career. But really, you're choosing him because you go, he's probably the most affordable for, again, if you're really cash strapped, he might be as good as you can get. And I'm okay with that because, again, scoring's been good without being great. Basement's been good without being amazing. And you're protecting yourself from a player that can pop 130s and has done that this year. And it's pretty high ownership that sits through there. So it's a pure defensive-minded move and or informed by a lack of cash. But I'm okay to do that at this point of the year. If maybe in your league, you're in the top 8 and 7 of the top 8 have him. That's the guy that could hurt you in any matchup. Look, I'm okay with that as a defensive play if you feel like that's the way to go. And then my final trade target. Look, I could have put any of the Lockies from GWS in there. I could have done that. Could have put Jack Steele in there, who's still finding unbelievable ways to score. Look, I probably could have put 30 players in here, but the problem is you've got to find something, not just for who I think are the best trade targets, but I want to give something for everybody, which is why outside of rucks, we've fit every position and we've gone from some value cash generation on your bench right through to one of the most expensive players in the game and hit every other spot through there. So let's find something for someone that wants to go full cowboy mode. We can help you with that. And someone that is really struggling to find some creative ways to get their team in the pocket that they want. Again, it's not uncommon to see a Horn Francis or a Nick Martin still on people's benches because they had to prioritize getting up maybe that cherry coverage and the ruck on field, and they had at least a Houghton type or a May type that could cover that forward premium injury for the extra week. So it was like, you get in, I got to deal with what would have been a donut otherwise. I get that. So let's help coaches that are cash strapped and need some creativity. My number 10 trade target, Brynn Teakle. This is a 2-week play, no more, no less, but he's coming off the back of a 95 against the hardest scoring ruckman in the game right now. So, and the fact he's forward eligible is why he's sitting in this spot. Forward eligible, playing as the number 1 ruck, and has got a clear 2 weeks for that to be able to go his way. I kind of glazed over it, but let's not forget, he dropped a 95 on Brodie Grundy, who has been unbelievably not just on a tear of scoring himself, but super restrictive for opposition to get any kind of points out of him. So for Brynn to be able to do what he did in this game, really impressive. And then when you start to fall forward to the fixture, you look, he's got the Cats and he's got the Saints. From a DVP perspective for rucks, 2 of the better matchups running around at the moment. That's not to say he's going to go 120 over the next 2 weeks, but if you can drop a pretty decent score at 90 plus against Grundy, it could build some confidence for you to be able to look at Teakle as a 2-week play. And the reason it could work, let's use Horn Francis as the illustrative point. You're basically going to make 300K going a Horn Francis, going all the way down to a Teakle, and all of a sudden that money, well, you can do a lot with that money. You can turn your Colby McCurcher all the way up to your Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. Maybe you sacrificed to be able to get the ruck in that you could only just afford, and you just scrimped and saved your way there. Here's a play. Maybe you had to run a comparably lower output option in your forward lines. Maybe you were looking at a Lord, maybe you're looking at a Jack Martin, maybe you're looking at a Jack Ross, who popped a pretty decent score to be safe. But maybe you kind of had to find that sub 600, sub 700K forward, and you're like, well, hang on a sec. I could, that's the other way to get there. Maybe I'm like, no, I'll double down. I'll extract some more out of this and run it through here. So it gives you at least creative plays to look at a couple of options through here. And that's why I like the Teakle call, because if you can score well against Grundy, the DVP looks really favorable for him here. And I'm happy to go and jump on it. But it's a 2-week play, and you do not want to get stuck with him in 3 weeks' time. So that's the risk point. You're you're locking in a move that you have to get off, and not because, oh, he's got some tough opponents and it could get hard. He's probably not playing after these next 2 weeks. So you can't get stuck. Thankfully, in AFL fantasy, you can be a little bit more aggressive with still 4 trades available after this round to be able to correct it. You shouldn't get too landlocked, but it's definitely a risk. So that's why Brynn Teakle sits in that spot. That's my top 10 trade targets. I've tried to find something for everyone. I hope I've been able to help you out with that. But the deal is, if I've named a player that you are planning on trading into, you have to like the video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so. We've been so overwhelmed and shown so much love by the AFL fantasy community this year, not just with you subscribing, liking, or commenting on these videos, but just getting in touch with us behind the scenes, becoming a Patreon, letting us know how important these videos, whether it be the strategy sessions, the 50 most relevant, the reviews during the year, let alone the trade targets, how much it's been able to help you with your AFL fantasy season. It means the world to us here at the Coaches Panel to be able to know that is true for you. Hey friends, good luck this round. Just 5 weeks of either pain and suffering, or joy and thankfulness to come for you, wherever you land yourself. We hope you are well, and we can't wait to be back with you later in the week, talking all things fantasy footy once more.